It's interesting to be describing to you sobering components of transplant community and what we do, and realizing that I am also standing between this and the social that's coming. Talking about liver transplants, talking about alcohol, or experiencing alcohol later. And so one of the things that interesting to me yesterday was when I got to a chance to meet some folks last night, some of them came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the good guy." Well, okay, thank you for that. That was a warm welcome, and I hope all New Yorkers do that. But UNOS is an interesting organization, and it's a first experience for me to be in healthcare. I've had experience of being in telecommunications and brokerage and financial services. And when you talk about those industries, you usually talk about transactions that are measured in millions and billions, maybe even more than that, per day. And typically, they're done so that those businesses or people are able to improve something about their life as a person, as a business, make it better, make it more convenient, and maybe even impact some. At UNOS, and in the transplant community, we're talking about significantly lower numbers. We're talking about tens, maybe a little more than that, thousands per day. And we're talking about not just altering lives, which we do with many of those. We talk about saving or extending lives for people, where every one transaction counts. Not that the ones I talked before don't, but it's accounting in a different way. Let me get my clicker. And one of the things you probably ought to know is this. There are 123,801 people on a national waiting list today, as of about noon this afternoon, waiting for an organ. On an annual basis, there are about 29,000 people who can expect to get one. Over the last 10 years, the organ recipients, or people who need an organ, have increased steadily. The number of the number of donors have pretty much been pretty flat. There are about 8,200 people registered today, nationally, to be donors. And so there's a supply-demand, obviously, situation. But just like with any free market economy, our goal, even though we're a nonprofit, is to figure out two things. One, to increase the number of transplants, and two, to also increase the number of better outcomes, or to have better outcomes, meaning survivability and things like that. And survivability both for the recipient, but also in many occasions, a living donor. During my speech right now, during my time with you, 2 people will get an organ transplant. 1 person will die waiting for one, and 4 more people will be added to the list. That's reality. Those are not great statistics, but that's where we are today. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we're doing it. And one of the things we're doing also is improving technology that powers transplant community. The statistics I talked about, they're very meaningful, but at the end of the day, it comes down to one number, and that number is 1. Because one person, one organ donor, can actually save or significantly alter and improve 8 lives. Think about that. Okay. So let me ask you a question. Through either personal experience at home, at work, colleagues, friends, how many of you have been touched by an organ transplant or organ donor? Show of hands. Thank you for sharing that. It's a lot. I mean, it's not all of the room here, but it's a lot of people. And it's hard to not imagine that many of us are touched like that. I want to share with you a short clip of a person who works at UNOS. His name is Chad, and I will let him explain his short story.
Thank you, Eunice, for saving my life. I'm Chad Southward, and I'm a curriculum development instructor here at Eunice. I've received 2 life-saving double lung transplants in 2004 and 2010, and I have everyone at Eunice to thank for taking part in that process. I am amazed by all the miracles in my life. I never believed I would live long enough to have a family and watch my own son grow.
Chad is not unique, and the fact that he got a transplant has nothing to do with him being at UNOS. He was on a waiting list just like many other people. The picture here you see is of Karen, who lost her 24-year-old son, David, to a brain aneurysm in 2009. The person you see she's next to is Joe, who received his heart. What she's doing is she's listening to her son's heart beating inside Joe's chest. In her words, David's life goes on in a way where other people can live with organs that they donated after David's passing. What's interesting is that many times people have to make these decisions at the worst part of their life after losing someone. The other interesting thing is that these decisions impact recipients very quickly, very often, not always, but very often. The organs, the person who receives the organs is either out of bed or out of the hospital even, at times before the burial occurs for the person who donated those organs. Think about that. This gentleman, his name is Donnie. He received an organ transplant in April of 2002. He has dreamed of becoming a police officer, and because of cystic fibrosis and deterioration of his lungs, he couldn't pass the test. After receiving this transplant, a double lung transplant, he has not only become a police officer, but he's also a volunteer fireman and a paramedic. Why am I telling you this? Because it's a sobering set of information, and it's reality. We don't deal with a lot of data. We don't deal with a lot of people, but we deal with in a way that affect people's lives in a great way. And so who are we? Who is UNIS, and what role do we have to play? We run a national transplant system matching life-saving organs with donors on the national waiting list. And there are 350 of us. There are lawyers, doctors, biostatisticians, policymakers, people at help desk, all kinds of folks running this engine, if you will, that administers this 30-year-old policy that has been put in place 30 years ago in 1984 to create this national waiting list. We collect and manage all this data. We have 30 years of data that does not get removed, deleted, or archived. I mean, we do save it, of course. And it's a very closed system. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. We organize and we develop and we implement the policies that are passed by the board of directors that are selected across the regions of the United States. We provide assistance to patients, families, and friends. And we also educate public and transplant professionals on changes in allocation policies, because that always evolves. Every 6 months, there are significant changes to allocation policies for every organ that gets transplanted, because every 6 months, the board meets to decide on those policies. And the changes they pass have a significant impact on how the organ transplants are done. The community. So what is the community of transplants? There are patients and donors, like I already mentioned. There are 41 elected board members. Think about a company where you have a board of directors and you have 41 people that have to make a decision. That's pretty hard. And so we're trying to find ways to get them not just engaged, but to also create a way for them to be more effective at it. There are government organizations, specifically Department of Health and Human Services. And there are 2 agencies that we're working specifically. One is, it's a Community for Medicare and Medicaid Association, and the other one is Health Resources and Services Administration. And they're very careful, and they're very, not slow, but they're very meticulous about how the policies are changed and what types of data we can collect. Because collection of data means dollars. Why does it mean dollars? Because the data that's entered by the organ procurement organizations, that's the groups that extract the organs to be donated. They have to enter that data into a very closed system which we created years ago. And so the more data they enter, the more time it takes them to do it, the more money they spend entering that data. And so the government is trying to be aware of the fact that it costs money, not to keep the data, but to really enter it. And it takes time for people to enter more data while, every time the organ becomes available, the clock starts ticking. There are 384 organizations that are involved in our community. And there are over 50,000 people who are members of UNOS that affect the way policies are implemented, one. And two, they're the one that represents the patients that get the organs placed. The country is divided into 11 regions for fairness. And that's why there are so many board members, because every region has to have representation. So, the decision about who gets the organ is a very complex one, because it's not just about the waiting time, blood type, how sick you are. Every organ has its own set of criteria that has to be evaluated. Kidney, for example, has over 130 antigens that have to be tested for, evaluated, so that the body can accept, actually, and not fight that organ. And at the same time, we have to be very transparent about how this is done. So all the policies, all the information is available to anybody who could see it on the web. We have to make these decisions, these very personal decisions, very impersonal. We have to allow our system to not really take into consideration your wealth, your social status, or even how nice you are. And that's why these decisions are made by the computer systems through allocations that are passed by these governing organizations. Imagine a human being trying to go through all of this on a regular basis. It would not be possible. We also have to be very timely. I mentioned earlier that once the organ becomes available, the time starts ticking. And so we have to make sure that the information entered into UNET, as we call it, that's the name of our system, is short for the folks that are entering that information about the organ. We also have to make sure that that information is provided on a timely basis to the transplant professionals, to the surgeons that have to make a decision whether that organ is going to be good for their patient. And we also have to decrease the time that it takes the data to be evaluated and calculated. Again, transparency, equitability, and timeliness. And equity speaks to the fact that everybody should have about roughly the same shot at getting an organ. So this is a simplified data flow that occurs every single time something happens in terms of organ becoming available and what happens. So on the left side, you have the wait list, and you have the donor system, donor information. And the wait list is essentially a list of patients that have been entered into the system that are waiting for an organ. The donor information is the information about the donor or the organs that are about to be donated. The policy on the bottom is what's passed by the board of directors that I mentioned before. And that passage of policy pushes us to implement effective algorithms that go through and crank through the set of data to really create the match. And the match is what takes that information, creates a list of patients. And every doctor that has to look at that, they have 1 hour to decide whether that information, that organ is going to be pertinent to their patient or not. If they don't decide, if they reject, whichever comes first, it goes to the next person on the list. One of the things that we're challenged with today is, because of the way policies and laws and regulations are done, we're not able to share a lot of transplant-related data with other information. The community is asking for it, but the way that the system was built is just not possible today. And so one of the things we want to do, and as you see that set of data on the transplant side, set of boxes on the transplant side, when the list of candidates is created, the surgeons that evaluate it, they usually go to a set of systems that they have developed themselves, healthcare systems, EMRs, electronic medical records, health information exchanges, systems that hospitals have. But those systems can't talk to us because we have a very closed system. And so they look at our information, and then they have to go and look at the information that is either available to them online if they happen to be in a surgical environment. But if they happen to be somewhere else, in a cafe drinking coffee, it's very difficult for them, and somebody literally has to read it to them. So there are opportunities, there are challenges, but there are opportunities on both sides, the donor information side, as well as the decision side, where the decision has to be made as to what that person is going to get that organ. A lot of decisions that are made go into this box called the transplant data. And the transplant data is what forces the policy to be improved every year, or at least to try to be improved by the governing bodies. The area in circle is the area that we're focusing on in terms of needing to improve it. That is a way where today, that manual entry that occurs, we want to be able to automate it. We want to shrink the amount of time it takes for people to put that information into the system. The match. The community has told us very loudly that they want to be able to consume the data in the way they want it versus the way we have developed it, versus the way it was developed years ago. And so the whole notion of creating APIs, creating larger data sets, marrying it with other medical data is what we're trying to do so that the match is not just a match about that particular patient, that particular donor or organ. It's a wider set of data that allows the doctors to make better decisions. And the transplant data is data that has significant impact on outcomes. Because that data today represents how the policies of the future will be implemented, how we will improve our ability to have more organs, to extend life, to include in this process a lot more information that today we simply don't collect, or we don't collect in one place. And so what our driver is clearly more transplants, better survivability. The community has been loud and clear about telling us they want more data. They also want mobility, meaning that they want to consume that service, whether they're on a desktop computer, laptop computer, or tablet. It doesn't matter. They want to be able to get that. Today, we don't have an API. We don't have a mobile app, as a matter of fact. That's the areas we're going to. It was also very good for me to see, I was glad to see that we're not the only Microsoft shop there is. The UShip folks are a Microsoft shop. So I felt like I'm not alone, even though I thought I was coming in here. And then what we're trying to do. Nothing against Microsoft, but again, it's very hard to get out of that place. And if we can succeed in it like they have, that'll be great. More educated decisions. You know, we talked about already increasing the set of data, increasing data and ability for data to be interacting with one another. Maybe there is a future in IoT of things, in IoT in transplant industry. I don't expect us to go to UShip and find a shipper to ship an organ someplace yet. But maybe over time, that may be a reality because maybe there'll be categories of shippers we could choose from, and maybe there'll be different certifications. And how does IoT play into that? Well, IoT plays into that because every organ has a label. And we're rolling out a system now, believe it or not. Everything up until this year has been done manually. So when an organ is shipped, when it's extracted, when it's placed into this special container, all of that information was written manually by people who were doing the work. So we're rolling out a system right now where they can just scan it. But imagine if they were able to not just scan it, but there was a way for us to use the RFID technology or other technologies to be able for that box to essentially communicate wherever it is. There are situations where organs get into the wrong place, or the organs were misread, or they misshipped, they mislabeled. And so rerouting of that would be so much easier if it was possible. So our path to the future, as I mentioned already, is better data. We believe that better data will lead to better outcomes, both in terms of decision-making process, as well as the outcomes of the transplants that take place. Because we will have more information, we will have deeper information and wider information about the patient. Today, regional centers have a lot of depth and information that they keep about the patient, right? Well, if the patient moves to a different state, that information can't follow them. The transplant information cannot follow the patient. It has to stay in the region that the patient was in. That's a limitation. Now, those laws were passed many years ago. Do they still apply? So we're not just challenged by the technology limitations, which we will overcome, but we will also work with various government organizations, the board of directors, and others to help us overcome laws and maybe improve laws that were passed before, and they were right for that time, but they're probably not right for this time because of how far along we've come. So we are going to be building APIs. We'd love to help to build those APIs. We will be investing in expanding our set of data. We have today we collect data that is not searchable at times. We go and then we inspect organizations for their compliance, but that information is stored in PDFs. And so this non-structured notion of collecting data and having a repository of both non-structured and structured data we don't have it today, but we will. We have to also to understand our community. The community has changed over time. They have grown. They have developed their own systems. And they use our services not in the way that were originally designed. So we have to learn more about how they consume our services. And we have to invest, as I said earlier, into building our infrastructure, building it out, not just in terms of bigger data or more data, but also in how the information is presented to the users through the APIs, allowing them flexibility to consume it in the way they need it. So I've talked a lot about our processes, the technology limitations, the laws, various other aspects. But as you can imagine, the transplantation process, the transplantation industry is evolving too. And I'll give you one example. There are many instances when someone wants to donate a kidney, for example, but they're not a match. And so in the past, there was this purely one-to-one relationship, and so if they wanted to, they couldn't. Well, some time ago, there was a concept introduced called kidney pair donation, where you could combine multiple people, where you could have multiple people who are willing to donate the kidney, and also multiple patients who need a kidney, and there are a greater chance of finding that match. So it's not one-to-one anymore. You have more candidates and you have more possible recipients. But instead of me trying to explain it, let me ask Letty to explain it for you.
Letty lives outside of Atlanta. The 44-year-old stays healthy by walking daily with a coworker. Friends and family are everything to Letty. So when 6 months ago, a close friend since 3rd grade disclosed that she needed a kidney transplant, it was no surprise Letty volunteered to be the living kidney donor and save her life. But there was a problem. Letty and her girlfriend Virginia did not match. That's when they learned about kidney paired donation. Letty tells their story in her own words.
I cried like for 3 days. And I didn't think it was fair that I was not a match, even though it was, it wasn't that. And I didn't want to give up. I said, I'm not giving up on her. She deserves to live. So if it means that my kidney has to go to somebody else to give her, for her to live, I'll do it. I never even thought of donating an organ. So when they tell me how it worked and everything and how it was going to take place, it was scary, but it worked out. Next thing I know, August or September, they're calling us that they found a match. And I had heard people were on the waiting list for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. So I could not believe that they found a match in less than 3 months. Don't be afraid or don't back out just because your loved one is not going to have part of you. Even if they don't have that part of you, they're still alive. And some people, they don't see past that. Oh, I didn't match, that's it. But you don't want your person to die. So if it means giving a little bit of you to somebody else to keep your family member, it's worth it. You know, Ken didn't match Valerie. Joan didn't match Randy. And if they wouldn't have agreed to do this like I did, they might not have their spouses and might not have my friend alive. But due to this, it does work, and we all have 3 loved ones alive.
So it's real, and it's out there, and we can all help. My job, our job at UNOS is to make sure that technology meets the demand of the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. You don't get to leave the stage yet.
That's great.
I have a question for you. So, a lot of what we've talked about today dealt with large scale, billions and billions of API calls. What you were just talking about, you have lots of data points per se, but not necessarily the same kinds of volume that we were talking about. Does that cause you to think differently about how you construct an API strategy? Does it do anything differently in terms of the tools you need? How do you think about that?
So we're starting to think about it, and so we're at a nascent stage. And so I do believe there is a difference in how we will need to approach it, because we just can't make it very open. I mean, it has to be still to be within the ranks, within the realm of what the healthcare regulations are. But the way we go about solving it, these problems have been solved in other industries. They're not unique to healthcare. And so the problems we're trying to solve with smaller sets of data are probably different, but how they get solved doesn't have to be. And so will we be reaching out to Mastery? Probably we'll be reaching out to other API providers, probably. So it's not about the fact that we have very little data and we don't have billions of records, but it's also about creating flexibility and creating mobility that other industries already have solved.
Yeah, and you mentioned the concept of designing mobile apps, and that's one of the things I think will get you to an interesting shift in terms of scale and what an API infrastructure can do for you, because it's lots of different devices is what we've been talking about recently. Now, you talked about this concept of better data, and you also mentioned something like 30 years worth of data. When you're thinking of this, are you thinking of going back and being able to somehow expose all that data to the right parties with the right kind of security?
Yes.
Okay.
We do today for our internal research department, and we also do it for another nonprofit in Minnesota called SR, their scientific research. They provide all the actual analytics and information about the statistical value and outcomes. But yes, the 30 years of data we have isn't going anywhere, and we just need to make better use of it.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the things I asked somebody earlier was this concept of, does the big data and analytics strategy need to be tied to an API strategy? Is that something that you're looking at
Yes,
at this point
that's
in time?
exactly how we're looking at it.
Okay.
Because we will be able to become part of electronic medical records element or opportunities, as well as health information exchanges through APIs. And by providing to some of our members, please keep in mind, some of our members are large organizations. They make a lot of life-saving decisions, but they also make a lot of money, right? But some of them, we have 50 north of 50,000. Some of them are small organizations, and there's many more of them. And so the more information we can present to them, whether it's our information or whether it's merged information with other sources, the easier it'll be for them to make those decisions that they need to make.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been talking about in our research around lifetime experiences is this concept of connecting your own data, but also connecting data from third parties. So this is what you'd be getting into in spades in terms of what's available for health. So you've obviously had data for a long time, and you're just kind of coming to the API strategy now. What was holding you back? Was it a security concern? Was it just that demand is greater now to share information than it's been in the past? What was the thing that ticked you over that said, now's the time?
Well, so I've been there for 5 months. So I haven't been there as many other people have. And I think it was the New York Times CEO who said they got very good at something and they just stuck with it. The previous CEO who was at New York Times.
Mark Franz.
Right. And I think that this was the same kind of mentality, that people developed something and it really worked really well, and then they just were afraid to change it. And so they didn't really move off of what they initially developed. And over time, as of about 4 or 5 years ago, they started falling really back. what it actually created is a gap between functionality we provide and third parties that came to the front and actually began to play a significant role providing the gap for data and information that we were no longer providing to the transplant community. And so what we're trying to do now is not just catch up, but really leapfrog, not competition, because we don't want to be in a position to change the industry or put companies out of business. But what we want to do is create the open exchange in companies that play in the transplant community so that other opportunities will come up. Because the more data you have, the more questions you could ask that you didn't even know you could.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. Alex
Thank you.
Tulchinsky, the good
Thank
guy.
you.